Present day it is. I'll set it in modern rural America. That's the strongest choice for your audience. The old Ford pickup sat at the edge of the auction yard, like it had nowhere else to go. Eleanor Briggs noticed it the moment she pulled in. Dusty, dented, one side mirror held on with electrical tape, parked crooked between two shiny newer trucks like it had simply given up trying to fit in. She almost didn't stop. Her back ached, her feet had swollen past comfort 2 weeks ago, and the August heat in West Texas was the kind that didn't ask permission before it pressed down on you. But something made her stop. Maybe it was the horse. A young colt, barely weeks old by the look of him, standing in a small pen near the back of the lot, his legs still uncertain beneath him, his dark eyes blinking slowly against the afternoon glare. He was thin, not dangerously so, but enough that you noticed, enough that it meant something. And beside the pen, barely upright himself, stood the man. He was somewhere past 60, lean as fence wire, with hands that told the whole story of his life without him saying a single word. His hat was pulled low, and he stood with the particular stillness of a man trying very hard not to let anyone see how close to the edge he was. Eleanor stepped out of her car slowly, one hand pressed to the small of her back, the weight of her 8 months-long belly shifting with her. She shouldn't have been there. Her doctor had said so just 4 days ago, in that calm, firm voice that doctors use when they mean business. Rest. That was the prescription. Rest and wait and let the world slow down for once. But Eleanor Briggs had never been good at slowing down. She crossed the gravel yard carefully, watching the man beside the colt's pen. He hadn't moved, hadn't looked up. His jaw was set the way jaws get set when a man is holding something together through pure will and nothing else. The auctioneer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. Numbers, lots, prices climbing and falling. Around her, ranchers moved with purpose, hats nodding, fingers lifting in quiet signals. This was their world. She understood it, had grown up on the edge of it, but today she felt like a visitor. She stopped a few feet from the man. The colt turned his dark eyes toward her. Yours? She asked quietly. The man didn't answer right away. His throat moved, then, barely above the noise of the auction, was his mother's. Eleanor looked at the colt again. Then she understood. The mother was gone. That's why the foal was here. That's why they were both here. "What happened?" she asked, and she kept her voice gentle, the way you do when you already sense the answer is going to cost something.
The man reached up and adjusted the brim of his hat, a slow, deliberate movement that bought him a second or two. "Lost her 2 nights ago," he said. "The foaling went wrong. Couldn't save her." He paused. "Couldn't afford the vet bills and keep the colt both, so here we are." He said it plainly. No self-pity, no drama. The way men of his generation said hard things, as facts, not complaints. But Eleanor had learned, in her 34 years, that the quieter a man said something painful, the deeper it actually went. She looked at him more carefully now. The shirt worn thin at the elbows, the boots resoled at least twice, the auction number pinned to his chest with slightly shaking fingers. "You're selling him," she said. Not a question. "Trying to." His voice dropped half a note. "Boy needs proper care, needs feeding I can't provide right now." He finally looked at her, pale blue eyes, weathered at the corners, steady despite everything. "Ranch has been struggling, lost my hired hand in the spring, been doing it alone since." Eleanor felt something move inside her, and it wasn't the baby, though he shifted too, as if listening. She thought about walking away. She had her own weight to carry, her own impossible situation waiting back home, a house with a nursery half finished, a crib assembled alone on a Tuesday night with instructions she'd had to read 3 times, a future she was building entirely by herself after Marcus had made it perfectly clear 6 months ago that he wasn't built for this kind of life. She did not need to take on someone else's sorrow today. And yet, how much are they likely to get for him? She asked. The man shrugged one shoulder. Dealer'll probably take him, give him a fair enough start, I suppose. But something in the way he said it, the slight catch between fair and enough, told her he didn't entirely believe it. What's his name? For the first time, something shifted in the man's expression. Not a smile exactly, but the shadow of one. Haven't named him yet, he said quietly. Didn't seem right, not until I knew where he was going. Eleanor stood there in the August heat, 8 months pregnant, sensible shoes on hot gravel, and felt the full, unreasonable weight of a decision forming in her chest before her mind had even caught up. She had a small property, 3 acres on the east side of Marfa. She had a barn her grandfather had built that still stood straight, still smelled of cedar and old hay. She had no husband, no partner, no help lined up except her mother, who was driving down from Amarillo the week before her due date. She had no business taking on a newborn colt. None. "Sir," she said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt, "what's your name?" He looked at her fully now, something careful and questioning in his eyes. "Walt Greer."
"I'm Eleanor." She extended her hand. He shook it the old way, firm, brief, respectful. "Mr. Greer, I have a barn. Small property, but it's sound. And I'm telling you right now I don't know nearly enough about raising a foal." Walt's brow furrowed slowly. "But," she continued, and she pressed her free hand gently against her belly without thinking, "I know what it is to be handed something fragile and be told to figure it out anyway." The auction crackled on around them. A lot number was called. Neither of them moved. Walt Greer looked at her for a long moment, at the barn coat she'd thrown over her maternity dress, at the calm, serious expression on her face, at the hand resting on her unborn child. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "you're about to have a baby." "Yes," I agreed, "I am. You can't raise a foal and a newborn at the same time." "Probably not well," she admitted, "but I'll try." Something broke open quietly behind his eyes. Not tears, not yet, but the thing that comes just before them, when a man who has been holding everything together for too long is suddenly offered something he wasn't prepared for. "Why?" he asked. Just that. One word, rough and honest. Eleanor thought about it seriously, the way the question deserved. "Because you named your ranch after your wife," she said. She had noticed it, barely visible on the side of the old Ford. Hand-painted letters, faded but deliberate. Margaret's Place. And you're standing here selling the last thing she loved because you won't ask anyone for help. Walt went very still. "My father was the same way," Eleanor said softly, proud to the point of breaking. "I watched it cost him everything." She paused. "I won't watch it happen to someone else if I can do something about it." The auctioneer called another lot. Walt Greer looked at the colt. The colt blinked his enormous dark eyes at both of them, patient as only newborn things can be. "I can't just let a stranger take him," Walt said quietly, and it wasn't clear whether he meant the colt or himself. "Then come too," Eleanor said simply. He looked at her sharply. "I need someone who knows what they're doing. My barn is empty, and my land hasn't been properly worked in 2 years. I'm having a baby in 4 weeks, and I cannot do everything by myself, even though I keep telling myself I can." She took a breath. "You need somewhere to land. I need someone who knows how to work a piece of land. The colt needs both of us." It was the most straightforward offer she had ever made in her life. No pretense, no romance, just 2 people in a difficult season, standing beside a newborn horse in the August heat, telling each other the truth. Walt was quiet for a long time. Around them, the auction moved on. Prices rose and fell, trucks pulled in and out. The ordinary commerce of a West Texas afternoon carried on without ceremony. Finally, Walt Greer reached up and pulled the auction number from his chest, folded it, put it in his shirt pocket. "I'll need to get my things from the ranch," he said. His voice was rough and low and trying hard to be steady. "Won't take long. Don't have much." Eleanor nodded. "I'll follow you," she said. They drove in a quiet convoy down two-lane roads, Eleanor's sensible sedan behind Walt's battered Ford, the trailer carrying the Colt rolling slowly between flat land and wide sky. She called her mother on the way. The conversation was short, colorful on her mother's end, and ended with, "Eleanor Marie Briggs, you are the most stubborn woman God ever put breath into, and I will be there Thursday." Eleanor laughed for the first time in what felt like weeks. The days that followed were not easy. They were not a movie montage of golden hour moments and effortless new beginnings. They were early mornings and sore muscles and learning curves, and two people who didn't entirely know each other navigating the same small property with careful respect. Walt knew the land. He walked Eleanor's 3 acres on the first morning and said little, but she could see him reading it. The soil, the drainage, the places where things had been and could be again. He repaired the fence along the east pasture without being asked. He checked the Colt 4 times a day, teaching Eleanor the schedule with patient, practical words. She, in turn, made room, cleared the small guest room of the boxes she'd been ignoring, stocked the kitchen with enough for 2, asked questions instead of pretending she already knew. "What was Margaret like?" she asked one evening, sitting on the porch while the sun went down behind the mesa. Walt was quiet a moment. "Stubborn," he said finally. "Generous. Laughed at everything." He was still. Then, "She would have liked you." Eleanor felt that land somewhere deep. "She would have told you to ask for help sooner," she said gently. Walt looked at the horizon a long time. "Yeah, she would have." 3 weeks and 2 days later, Eleanor's son was born at 4:47 in the morning at the Marfa County Hospital, her mother on one side of her and the nurses steady and calm around her. It was hard and bright and loud, and then, suddenly, impossibly quiet as they placed him against her chest, and the whole world rearranged itself into before and after. She named him James. Walt was in the waiting room when they wheeled her out. He stood up immediately, hat in his hands, face lined with something between relief and reverence. "He's perfect," Eleanor told him. Walt nodded once and looked away quickly and cleared his throat. On a Thursday morning in late October, when the air had finally broken and something cool moved across the land for the first time since spring, Eleanor stood at the pasture fence with James in her arms, watching Walt work with the colt in the early light. The foal, they'd named him Sterling eventually because of the gray that was beginning to come through his coat, moved with more confidence now. His legs had found their purpose. His eyes had brightened. Walt moved alongside him easily, unhurried, speaking low. Eleanor watched them and felt something she hadn't expected to feel again so soon, the particular warmth of not being alone, not rescued, not saved, just accompanied, just known. James made a small sound against her shoulder, and she pressed her lips to the top of his head. "We made it," she whispered to him, to the land, to the morning. And somewhere, she imagined, her father heard it. There are moments in a life when everything could go either way, when pride could win and help could be refused, and two people could simply pass each other in a dusty auction yard and go home to their separate hardships. But sometimes, not always, not often enough, someone looks up at the right moment. Someone offers a hand, not from pity, but from recognition, from the quiet understanding that hard seasons are not meant to be survived entirely alone. Eleanor Briggs didn't save Walt Greer that afternoon, and he didn't save her. They simply saw each other, clearly, honestly, without pretense, and chose not to look away. And sometimes that is the whole of it. That is enough. That is everything. If this story moved something in you, if you've ever carried something heavy alone, or been seen by a stranger at exactly the right moment, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Desert Heart. Every week we bring you stories like this one, stories of quiet strength, ordinary courage, and the kind of love that shows up when you least expect it, but need it most. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so the next story finds you. This story carries real and lasting value. It honors the dignity of older Americans who carry loss silently and refuse help out of pride, a deeply common and deeply human struggle. It speaks to single motherhood without judgment, presenting it as a story of strength rather than hardship. It illustrates the power of community and mutual aid, that asking for and offering help is not weakness, but wisdom. It also gently models healthy grieving, the rebuilding of trust after abandonment, and the quiet heroism of showing up for a stranger. For older American audiences especially, it reflects a world they recognize: land, livestock, hard seasons, and the people who endure them with grace.